你好，我是万民，我从广州来，我是一名原画设计师，这就是皮克斯。
At Pixar, we're passionate about making great films that connect with people all over the world.
That's not easy. It takes a lot of hard work.
They leave for class, and there's another guy in the middle.
This is fun, but he's been all doesn't too quickly like
We apply the same level of creativity and intensity to everything we do. From the way we connect as film crews, to the way we research our films, it is in everything we do as a studio.
It's not hard work all the time. This is how we create the characters, worlds, and stories that we're proud of.
This is how we inspire each other.
这就是皮克斯。
This is who we are.
We're just as committed to each other as we are to our work.
This is how we make movies that we hope will stand the test of time.
"有请极客公园创始人、总裁张鹏。
大家好啊！我非常高兴又回到这个舞台。首先向大家道个歉，今天我们下午开始的晚了一点，中间有一些延时，所以可能这个时候大家听一下午挺累了。但是我觉得我向大家保证，接下来的这1个小时，可能要1个小时的时间，会是你一定不想错过的，因为在我们的人生经历里，我相信很多人都曾经被皮克斯的影片打动过。它带来的不仅仅只是，我觉得用了一个 CG 动画做了一个很有意思的片子，带来的不只是欢笑，可能也会有一些忧伤，可能也会有一些泪水，也会给你一些勇气、力量。这家公司有着非常长的历史，33年，在他们的历史上，他们没有任何一部电影是失败的。他们的每一部电影都给我们留下了特别美满的这种印象。怎么去做一家能够持续创新的公司？ 怎么才能够把这种创意、这种 creativity 能变成一个持续涌现的系统？我们看到的不只是一部部影片，我们看到的是一个了不起的组织。而这个组织的创建者之一，他在今年2019年即将退休。那么，这位联合创始人，也就是 Ed Catmull 先生，是这家公司3个联合创始人之一，而他在最开始也是这家公司的总裁，并且直到现在也都是。在他身上，我们可以得到最原汁原味的这个组织背后的那种精华。其实我一直特别渴望能够把他请到中国，请到极客公园。我们花了很多年的时间，终于今天有机会让他来到极客公园创新大会，让我们能够一起跟他一块儿去理解一个创新的组织该如何搭建。当然，我内心中也有另一个期待，在这1个小时里，我们将会重温那些所有给我们带来快乐的皮克斯的电影。我相信一定会给我们留下最完满的这届大会的回忆。好，接下来就让我们用热烈的掌声来去欢迎。等一等，我想一下。我觉得我有个建议啊，大家对皮克斯都什么感觉？期待嘛，热爱嘛，渴望嘛。如果这样的话，我想有个小请求，我们是不是，因为 Ed 先生呢，他最近在他的腿脚不是很灵便，其实他一直都还在拄着拐杖，但是这次他还是坚持来到我们的会场。我觉得我们应该多给他一些致敬。我们是不是可以大家把手机的闪光灯打开？哎，对，我觉得如果你觉得皮克斯曾经对你有过这样的触动，我觉得你可以把你的手机的闪光灯打开。那打开之后呢，因为你就举着不方便鼓掌了嘛，没关系，我们可以用欢呼的方式，对不对？好，做好准备啊，做好准备。让我们有请皮克斯动画和迪士尼动画的总裁，同时也是皮克斯动画的联合创始人 Ed Catmull 先生。Welcome, Ed.
All for you. Let's take a seat.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me for my sitting down, but part of me is very young. My niece is only 1 month old. I'm very pleased to be here. The first thing I want to note is that we do not make movies for children. We forget that children live in an adult world, and they are wired to figure things out. Figuring things out is a creative act. When we tell children that something can't be done, they will ask over and over again, why not? It is the creative child in each one of us that we are trying to appeal to. So the central question that I want to address is how can we develop more creativity in our organizations? You already have creative people. How do you unleash these people to be more creative? For me, most people define creativity too narrowly. It's like the arts, designing a product, and in technology, and in the sciences, we would say there's a creative act. Yet I would still say this is too narrow of a definition. Creativity is the process by which we solve problems. They might be in story, but they might be in business or in relationships between families, family members, partners, customers, and adversaries. It's only natural to ask, how do we become more creative? This is the wrong question. The real question is, what are the management, cultural, and personal forces that block creativity and change? And it became important to me back in the 1980s because of this puzzling observation. I was near Silicon Valley. I was actually with Lucasfilm up in just an hour north of it. But I had friends in all of these companies. And there was this great pattern of successful companies, or a great number of them. And the best had creative ideas, they had funding, good execution, they had big impact, and they went public, they had the best engineers, and they had access to customers and their needs. These were creative environments. These companies were influential, and they changed our culture. And then, for a large number of them, they made some incredibly dumb decision. And I don't mean looking back at it dumb. I mean it was dumb at the time dumb. Now, I knew a lot of these people. They were smart, creative, and experienced, and it was hard to make sense of it. It was clear that something was going wrong in very successful organizations. Some force was taking them off track. Really smart people were missing something that was important for their survival. And without seeing it or knowing it, these creative people became uncreative. And whatever these forces were, they were powerful and they were hidden. They couldn't see their own problems. And I realized that if they couldn't see their problems, that meant that I probably could not see mine. How do we face and address problems that we cannot see? Now, with that as background, finally in 1991, we had a chance to make a movie, our first movie, which is Toy Story. However, at the time, we didn't know anything about making a movie. We didn't have anybody in the company who knew anything about making the movie. We had to figure it out from scratch. And with the success of Toy Story 4 years later, we drew several conclusions from that experience. Some of those conclusions were right, but it turned out that many of them proved to be very wrong, and it took years to figure out what the wrong conclusions were. We had to face the issue of our hidden problems. Now, there were some good things that came out of it that have continued to this day. One of them is something we call the Brain Trust. Now, it's actually not a group. It's a way of running certain meetings. When we show a version of our film, and we make about 9 versions of each movie before it's finished, which means there are 8 versions that don't work. But when we look at a version, we assemble a group of the directors, the storytellers, the writers. This is a group of people who have a genuine intent to help each other. Now, they're all working on their own projects, but if their colleague is successful, then that actually helps them, because at some time, they'll be on the other side of the table. So when I said it's a way of running a meeting, it in fact is based upon 4 principles. The first one is that it's peers talking to peers, filmmaker to filmmaker. It's not boss to filmmaker. It's not boss to employee. It's people of the same experiences talking with each other. We work hard to remove the power structure from that room. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have a structure in the company, because we do. We have a lot of things going on, or thousands of things going on. But in that room, we don't want any power structure. And if there are powerful people in the room, then at the beginning of the meeting, we want them to shut the hell up for 10 to 15 minutes. If they talk, they set the tone of the room. We do not want that in that room. We want the director to feel that the choices are theirs. The group cannot override them, and nobody in that room can override them. And there's a reason for this. One is they're coming in nervous. They're putting something up in front of other people, and they know that it's flawed. So what we want to do is to make it safe for them to listen. We don't want them to come in with a defensive posture. The second principle is to give and listen to honest notes. You have to say what you really think. You don't try to be polite or hold back. You must say what you think. The third principle is to watch the personal dynamics very carefully. Does everyone contribute? Does somebody dominate? Are they really trying to help each other? Now, you might ask, do we always live up to our own principles? Well, in general, yes, which shows up in our films, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes the meetings are a mess, they don't work, people's feelings get in the way, and that's not helpful. But every once in a while, magic happens. And by magic, I mean that ego is gone from the room, that ideas come and go without people becoming attached to them. If I put out an idea and it doesn't work, then it goes away, I don't feel bad because I'm not the idea. And if you're not attached to it, then you're freer to come up with new things. Still, even with this remarkable group of people helping each other, we've had a significant failure at some point on every film we've made. And the lessons from these failures have led to some new insight. The first thing was we had to rethink failure and errors. Now, failure is fairly popular to talk about nowadays, and there are a lot of books on it with sayings like you need to fail to succeed, fail early, fail fast. But we have a problem. There are two meanings to the word failure. The first one is the one we use with life experience. You try something, it doesn't work. It's a powerful learning tool, and we all know this. We can all look back at failures in our past, and they helped us grow and teach us things that we didn't even want at the time. But that's what comes with it. That's the professional experience. But there's a second meaning to the word failure, and that's the one we learn in school. We fail a class, fail a test. It means we didn't work hard enough or we screwed up. We might fail at a job. These are all bad meanings. But it isn't just in school. Projects fail, companies fail, relationships fail, bridges fail, and in politics and business, failures are used as bludgeons with which to attack opponents. There's a palpable aura of real danger around failure. And this meaning is deeply ingrained in us. And we mix these two meanings up. There's that dangerous one, and there's the learning one. It is almost impossible for people to emotionally separate these two meanings. And we must be consciously aware of the reality and impact of this second meaning. Now, the combination of the two meanings is usually interpreted as that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But for me, the better meaning is that the failures are a necessary consequence of trying something new. Now, the failures that we're afraid of are in the future. We don't know what they are. And hoping that they will be educational doesn't do much to reduce the anxiety. We only have the luxury of calling a failure a learning experience after it happens. Another problem is that it's hard, well, I'm not saying this right. We frequently do not want to make mistakes. We would agree with that. We want to make 0 errors. And 0 errors is very easy to understand, and it is meaningful in some professions. For instance, in the airlines industry, the manufacturers want 0 errors, the airline companies want 0 errors, and you want 0 errors when you're on the airplane. So you want 0 errors. Obviously, medicine is more complicated, but you don't want procedural errors. And in bank transactions, you want 0 errors. 0 is easy to articulate, but most of life is not like this. In most environments, people have unspoken fears, whether they're justified or not. People try not to rock the boat. They take cues from each other. We have to work hard to make it safe to say something wrong. And we know this comes from human emotion, but it is usually unspoken. We cannot assume that we know what somebody else is thinking, or what their worries are, or what their concerns are. Often they won't tell you, but they affect what they do. So just how strong are these emotions? And I'll give you an example from Pixar. We have several departments at Pixar, such as animation, modeling, making effects, lighting. And for every show, the people who are running the show have to staff up their crews in these departments. They have to pick the people to go into the department. So they struggle with each other to get the very best people in the departments on their show. Now, the truth is, they can't always get who they want. So sometimes they have to take people who are unproven. They have to give a chance to these unproven people. Now, it's fairly frustrating because they would have these arguments about how they get the best people, because they're fighting to get the best. And they don't like to take the chance on new people. So a few years ago, I asked the leaders who do this, I went over this, I said, you try to get the best people, and often you can't get them, and you have to take a chance and give somebody the job, and you hope that they will rise to the occasion. So over these years, what percentage of the people that you asked to rise to the occasion were not able to do it? And their answer was about 5%. 5%? That's in the noise level. It kind of blew my mind. I had to go back and think about this, because these are people who think that they're risk takers. But if they only have 5% of the people who can't rise to the occasion, that means they're trying for 0. So in a group in which you say we don't go for 0 errors, they're trying for 0 errors. But then I looked at it from their point of view. In front of them, in the future, they know we change our films, which means there are problems that are coming of unknown size, at an unknown time, and the problem itself is unknown. That is their risk. So when they think they're taking risk, their risk is that environment, the problems. Therefore, in order to meet the risk, they only want people who have proven themselves. Now, here's the key idea to take away from this. Once you explain this to them, that 95% of the people succeed and get better in the short term. So it's a long-term game that they get better, but they get better in the short term. So it doesn't make any sense not to give these people a chance, because so many of them succeed. So logically, they know that their fears are without a grounding. Even when they understand it, they still can't do it. They still fight for the best. The emotional need to deliver overrides the logic. Now, it is critically important to understand the emotional part of making these decisions. And we have to make it safe for people to operate in a messy space when they have these emotional fears. Incidentally, our solution to that was we took away the ability to select their crew. So we gave it to somebody else. And everybody was happier afterwards, but convincing them was a problem. The next major insight came in the making of our films, and that is the fragility of new ideas. All of our movies are bad at first. And I don't mean that we're being modest or self-effacing. I mean that they really are bad. They don't work. And at the beginning, we don't know what a film is going to turn into. So I'll give an example from the movie Up. In the first version, there was a castle floating in the sky. And on it, there was a king. He had 2 sons. The sons didn't like each other. And the people in this castle were at war with the people on the ground. And through some sort of accident, the 2 sons fell down onto the ground, and they were wandering around in enemy territory, and they came across a large bird. This version did not work at all. The only thing left from it was the bird and the word up. So at that point, they had to rethink it, and they came up with a prologue. And in this prologue, you had Carl and Ellie, these 2 children that grew up. They got married. They couldn't have children. When they got old, Ellie died. Carl was sad, and he floated away in a balloon, and there was a stowaway boy. Now, the first version was 20 minutes long. What you actually saw in the movie was 4.5 minutes, because it had been condensed down to this diamond. But when we saw the prologue, we knew that we had gold, but it was only a prologue. And when they floated away, the house landed on a lost Russian dirigible. This version didn't work either. So later they made it into a Venezuelan tepui. So those little strange mountains in Venezuela. And there were these, if you had these eggs from the bird, it kept you alive forever. Well, the ending of this didn't work at all. So we got rid of the magic eggs. Finally, the emotional ending came together at the very end. Now, the path was wildly unpredictable. New ideas are fragile and often off track. We had to protect that crew while they worked on something that didn't work. We couldn't even judge whether or not the project was good. The only thing we could judge was what was the spirit in the room, how well did these people work together, how much laughter was in the room. If they were laughing and having fun, we knew they would solve the problem. Likewise with Coco, a film about a uniquely Mexican holiday, the Day of the Dead was a risky idea. And we had to protect it because it was not an obvious idea. And it required a lot of research and passion to understand and respect this culture to finally turn it into something which is very different than what they started off with. In fact, originally it was going to be Pixar's first full-on musical. Still, they couldn't figure out how to do it. Anyway, in 2006, there was a new chapter in our life, and that was when Disney acquired Pixar. Now, we had watched from the sidelines earlier than this, when Disney had made Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King. They made a rapid increase. They had a rapid dramatic success. They made 4 films which had a big impact, and then they went downhill. And they went downhill, and it was 17 years later before they would have a successful film. So because they had not succeeded, Pixar was acquired, and so I was made president of both studios. But when we arrived at Disney, we were welcomed because they knew they had failed, and they were open and eager to learn. So we made 2 major steps to begin with. The first one was to form the equivalent of what we called the Brain Trust, and to get this group to function well together. And it took about 2 years for them to really fully function well together and completely have each other's trust. We also had to get everybody in the studio to reconceive their jobs and how they thought about mistakes, because the studio was based upon not making mistakes when they made their films. So we had to go and explain that that was silly, that you had to make the mistakes and learn from them, and you would move much faster. And we used the very first movie we made down there, called Bolt, to reorient the studio. Now, the particular example was a character in the movie that was a hamster. It was not animatable. It's too difficult. And they said it would take 6 months to fix it in order to make it useful in the movie. Well, we only had 8 months left to finish the film. It was not possible to finish. So I called the whole studio together, and I gave them a talk. I said, don't ask for permission. Don't even think that you don't have to make mistakes. Just try something and don't ask for permission. Just do whatever you think is right. So that weekend, 2 people went home and remade that character, and within 1 week, the character was in production, and we were back on schedule. Now, why did we go from 6 months of projection to 1 week of what it actually took? Because they were projecting around making a character that worked perfectly before they would release it. Well, that was silly. You can make a mistake, learn, and then fix it, and iterate much faster. So the notion of not making mistakes was something that we had to get out of the culture. Our job is not to prevent errors. It is to respond when things go wrong. This is where the creativity arises. Since then, every single film at Disney has been a critical success. And we released our 10th film this year. And then starting with Tangled up through Frozen and Zootopia, they've been big commercial successes. It's a completely different place. It's a completely different personality than Pixar. They're very separate. They don't even work the same way. I try to keep them separate. They're not allowed to do production work for each other. Because if we tried to do things the same way, we'd be producing the same films. And we want diversity there. Now, there's an important observation that I want to make out of that experience from all these years at Disney. The first observation was when we got down there, I could explain, and I did, all of these principles in about 4 hours. They all nodded their heads in agreement, but it didn't make any difference. The ideas sounded good, but it took 4 years for them to actually understand it throughout the entire studio. There's a vast difference between saying something or thinking you understand it and actually understanding it. It is easy to state your values and to agree on them. The hard part is asking yourself why you don't live up to them. Changing culture is an in-the-trenches experience. It is doing hard analysis. It's trying to go under the cover, trying to get people to talk about what their fears are and to get them to feel ownership in what we're doing, that they own our company too. The second observation I want to make is that when we arrived at the studio was considered on the outside to be a failure, and inside they considered themselves to be a failure, and they were not making creative films. Now, they are very successful and creative. But here's the key point. They're largely the same people. So we took the people who were not creative, and those same people are. And what changed? We had to enable them. And once they were enabled, they changed. Now, we can look around, and you're the ones who are in this world now. Technology is changing. Software is changing. Skills of people coming out of schools are changing. There is nothing in this equation that is stable. And many people are frightened by the amount of change. New problems arise continuously. Our creativity, again, is in how we respond to the unknown that is coming. And not to be afraid. Our first products, our first films are scary. And for a lot of companies, once they go to the scary point, they don't want to do that again because it was too scary. You can't do that. You always have to be a little scared. You're not brave unless you're scared. Now let me end with saying something about Steve Jobs. I worked with Steve for longer than anybody else. I knew his early behavior, and it wasn't good. It was exciting to write about or make movies about, but it wasn't a good behavior to begin with. But there was an arc to his life. He'd failed at Apple. This is more like the hero's journey. A person gets kicked out of their kingdom. They wander around in the wilderness, learning lessons and coming back changed. 25 years ago, the failures at Next and at Pixar, because Pixar initially had failed as a company, the failures at Next and Pixar changed Steve. And Steve was so smart that he learned from his mistakes and his failures. He came through this process changed. And after he changed, the people who were with him stayed with him for the rest of his life. It's one of the reasons why you don't hear a lot of the stories that took place after that, because they weren't going to talk to reporters about it because they were still working for him. But they stayed with him because there was a loyalty, because he turned into a different kind of person. Now, there's a reason I think this is important. People frequently hear about Steve with the bad behavior at the beginning, and they think that kind of person made the great Apple. That's not what happened. It was the changed Steve, the person who learned from his mistakes, who made the great Apple. And while Steve was always just as intense and intelligent, honest, and driven by quality and a passion and a desire to make a difference, he developed, and I saw this, it's kind of surprising, he really developed this ability to listen. He had empathy. He showed deep caring for people. He had added this to his repertoire. He put it all together. And the change in him was real and deep and was a great arc. I hope that all of us have our own personal arcs with ups and downs, but the desire to put it all together. There's a phrase that's used when people write about Steve, which is, they use it to describe him. They say he has a reality distortion field. Now, in most ways, I don't like this phrase. It's because it's used in a somewhat negative way. But there is a sense in which I do like this phrase. If you believe, as I do, that your actions make a difference, then this means that you modify your reality. You start with why not, and you will change the future. Please take this opportunity to make the world a better place. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Thank you very much for showing us so many stories behind the scenes. So let's move to this couch. I think that will be more comfortable.
Okay.
It's surrounded kind of like some of your kids, right? Yeah. Yeah, we can take this. Yeah.
Okay, good. And get Mike. I like Mike a lot.
Well, you know, there's a sentence I always want to say. Welcome to Geek Park.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I want to say
I'm
that
happy
for
to
many
be at
years.
Geek Park.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, we are truly honored to have you here to join us in Geek Park 8th, 2019. And, everybody knows that Pixar started his wonderful journey with Toy Story 1. Well, Toy Story 1 is, I believe, the first ever movie made only by CG technology.
Yes.
And it changed a lot. And so I always wondering, when did you come up with this idea? And how long did it take to make it happen?
Well, for me, it goes back a long ways. When I was in high school, I wanted to be an artist. I didn't think I was good enough, so when I went to college, I switched into physics.
So you want to be an artist at the very beginning?
At the very beginning.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to be an artist.
What gave you up? What made you give up? At that time?
I didn't see how to get to be good enough.
Okay.
There were no schools for it. So I might have been able to do it. I was the best artist in the school.
Yeah.
But I was judging myself against what I saw at Disney. And I said, I'm not nearly good, and I don't know how to get there.
Okay.
So that's why I switched over into physics and got an undergraduate degree. But computer science was new at the time, so I got another degree in computer science. And then when I went to graduate school, the first class I took was computer graphics. Well, here was science and here was art.
Oh, you find the perfect mix. Right?
Yeah. So, I want to make a movie. So my goal coming out of college was to make a film.
Oh, that's way before.
Yeah, I got my doctorate degree in 1974.
1974.
Yeah,
Oh.
and Utah was one of the first of the 4 nodes it was called ARPANET, it's now the internet.
Yeah.
But the
ARPANET.
first 4 nodes were there, so I was there for that.
Yeah.
So
you are the first generation.
First generation.
Yeah.
I was using email back in the early 1970s.
Wow.
And I learned even then, a lot of people said bad things in email they wouldn't say in person. Still happens today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they were the foundation school for computer graphics, but they were very crude pictures with polygons, black and white. So my PhD was to figure out how to do curved surfaces with texture on them.
Oh.
So then I left, and it was to go to the next place that would fund advancement. But I believed when I graduated that it would take 10 years to get to the point where we could make an animated film. It took 20.
It takes 20, right?
Yeah.
It's not 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah, I'm stubborn.
No, you are not. Yeah. So actually, the idea began at 1970. Things like that, right?
Yeah.
But, when you finally finish Toy Story 1, and it's a great success, and I'm wondering, it's a crucial moment, because at that time, I believe Pixar, in the very beginning, is not tried to be an animation studio. You guys making TV commercial and maybe software-related things.
We even made hardware. We made computers.
Computer, right? It's not a movie studio, but after Toy Story 1, you go public, and it's
1
like
week later.
Yeah, you 1 week, just 1 week. So what changed? What triggered the transformation of the mission of Pixar?
Well, for me, it was over all these years to recognize that the technology had the potential, but we had a number of things we had to do before we could get there.
Yeah.
So the 20 years was solving those problems. And we couldn't have done it earlier because the computers weren't fast enough, and we didn't have enough tools. But we reached the point where we had it, we could make the movie, and the focus for all this time had been to make the movie. Now we're a company, we're going to make more movies, but for me personally, I'd achieved the goal, and when I achieved my goal, it meant I lost it.
Yeah, you already achieved the goal.
Yeah, I can't do the same thing over again.
You need a new one.
Yeah, never repeat yourself. So I had to figure out what a new goal should be, and it took me a year.
Oh.
Now, I'm the president with the company, and I have a lot to do. It's not like I was sitting around idle for a year. But in my mind, I was thinking, that's just repeating what we did. What's new? But I realized that looking back, as I went through time, starting from leaving graduate school
Yeah.
to various places, that the way people worked together was extremely interesting. And so I loved the technology, I was very good at programming, but I also was fascinated by the interactions, why people did things, why they didn't do them, or what held them back. And so slowly I made this transition, and I didn't intend to, but I slowly made the transition to managing, but watching what happened with people. I have theories about how to do things. And I discovered that 1/3 of the time my theories were completely wrong. And 2/3 of the time they were right.
Yeah.
And so when I went from New York Tech to Lucasfilm, I could restart and throw away the bad third ideas, have new theories, and then find out 1/3 of them are wrong. I think that's always true. About 1/3 of times I say something, ignore it. In 5 years from now, I'll tell you that, that was wrong.
Yeah.
But that was the transition, and realize, how do we keep this alive? How do we make a culture that keeps changing? So that then became the goal, was the creation of a sustainable culture that continues to change and alter itself, not to hang on to what we did in the past or repeat what we did, but to always look forward, learn from the past, but use it to look forward.
So it seems like when you fulfilled a dream that take you maybe over 20 years, and then you expand it to a whole new system. Like it's more, challenging. Challenging. It's not only by technology, because it's complicated, and it means you're gonna invite many intelligent people into this system. How do you do that?
Oh, yes. Well, that's part of figuring it out. Now, that was the next 10 years, was to figure this out.
You didn't figure this out at that time, right?
But it was, again, I had friends in Silicon Valley and then people down at Disney. So realizing that part of it was living our principles, which means that we start with people. For me and my entire professional life, we've always been connected with other companies and other people. We publish everything. Some people are surprised by this because Steve is very secretive.
Yeah.
Pixar published everything. Steve never said a word.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he let me do it because for me, I didn't care about a particular idea. It's a paper, it's 7 pages long. What I wanted was to attract the best people in the world.
Okay.
So if we participate in the community and we intellectually engage with people on the outside, we know who they are, and they know they can come to a place which is open and free. So we got all the best people. So that was a win. And on the creative side, it was to pick the directors first. We wouldn't say, we want you to make this movie. We'd say, you're really smart. You think of the idea, right?
Yeah.
We want the story to come from them.
Okay. Yeah, I think, at that time, it's very difficult because I always want to ask this question. When you first introduce your idea, use CG to make movie, the entire movie, when you first introduced this idea to the movie industry guys, how did they like it?
Well, for them, this was absolutely inconceivable. That is, it was so inconceivable, they wouldn't even say no because they thought it was an irrelevant discussion.
Irrelevant. Oh, okay.
Right.
It had count it in, right?
Yeah, it's like, don't even ask me the question. This is of no importance to us whatsoever.
Yeah. So when did they realize that's relevant? It's take them how many years to realize that?
Well, the actual transition, we had developed a technology. I'd worked at Lucasfilm, and then we spun out as a group. But Lucasfilm was using our technology for making images.
Yeah.
And well, in 1991, there was a fairly important year because Pixar got the contract to make Toy Story.
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast came out, and it used some computer graphics for this
Yeah.
ballroom scene. And Terminator 2 came out. So the two biggest movies of the year used computers in a significant way.
Okay.
Now, most of the industry still didn't notice, but it was on the edge of their notice. In 1993, Jurassic Park came out.
Wow.
Now, Jurassic Park was a huge success. So starting at that point until 95, so that in a 2-year period, then the whole industry switched over to digital audio, digital editing, computer graphics. Now, for them, it was like this sudden switch. Now, from our point of view, it's like, uphill
You're
for
so slow.
20 years.
20 years.
And now they recognize, you think, overnight success. No, it was not overnight.
Yeah.
But that was the period of time in which the whole industry switched over.
Yeah. Sometimes people need to see it, then they can believe it, right?
That's
Most
right.
people.
They have to see it.
That's what happened.
Right. So your job is to
make
think
them
of
see it.
something and then make them see it.
Yeah.
And by then it's too late. You've just blown past them.
Yeah, you're already a success. Yeah. So let's turn back time a little bit. Let's see some pictures. I think this picture is very famous one, and the picture is about the 3 founders of Pixar. Well, it's not like that. I think we have a real picture. So this,
No, that's perfect.
that's perfect. Yeah,
I love that.
That's perfect. And this is the real one. And this, you and Steve and John, and I believe at the very beginning, all you 3 have different roles.
Yes, John came in as an animator and a gifted storyteller,
Okay.
and very open. So that was important. My background, of course, was coming out of the technology and trying to make this happen, and I'd hired John at Lucasfilm. And then we spun out. Initially, Steve tried to buy us, and we said no because he wanted to turn us into a computer company.
Yeah.
But after he formed Next, I met him again, and at this point, he negotiated. He bought us out. So we were a hardware company to begin with because there was no business
Yeah.
for computer graphics.
Yeah.
So we sold to medical companies. We built this high-end computer graphics image computer, but it was $110,000. It was an expensive machine.
Yeah.
And we failed. Okay? So Steve was the one who dealt with the outside. But when we failed, we all stuck together. Usually in Silicon Valley, companies get together, everybody learns something, but they fall apart.
Yeah.
The knowledge that came from the failure is spread out over those people, but the industry as a whole benefits from it, or somebody else benefits from it, but that original company has lost the knowledge because they fell apart. In our case, we failed, but we all stayed together. So
That's important. Yeah.
so when we got to Toy Story, and it was hard, we all knew that we had each other's backs. So in the case of Steve, Steve was the person who was dealing with the outside, dealing with Disney, and John was directing the film, and I was managing the company. And then over time, we went public. We ultimately got acquired, and again, he was still that person there. He was now on the board of Disney, but we had a group who was like a board of directors for Pixar after we got acquired. So it was like a board of directors, but it was and met every 3 months, and Steve was still part of that.
Wow.
And so he was like not only the protector, but every once in a while he would come in with a 2x4 because sometimes, with every film, sometimes you need somebody from the outside to come in and tell you you're making a mistake.
Well, that means Steve is not just an investor. He make much more important impact to Pixar.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because Steve had this really strong value system. And the other thing which some people don't understand is you saw in those imagery or those pictures at the beginning where they were in our atrium, this big area. It's a wonderful area. It's all Steve Jobs. He's the one that conceived of the building, the rules for it, and it is built around people interacting with each other. So when you saw people on scooters, we really have scooters there.
Yeah.
And the eating area, the meeting area is at the middle, and the theaters and the food, because we want people to intersect with each other, to cross and have accidental encounters. That's Steve.
Yeah.
It's very much about how people work with each other.
So he set the tone of the culture.
Yeah. So we each had our role, and so for him it was an environment and to support us. He didn't tell me what to do. There are a lot of things I did which were the opposite of the philosophy of Steve.
Oh, really? I was really wondering how you work with Steve, how it feels like.
Well, if we would disagree, and we disagreed, not terribly often, but every once in a while we would disagree. And I'd say something, and he would immediately shoot down what I said.
Oh, really?
He could think much faster than I could.
I think much faster, right?
So I'd say, okay, let's talk about it later. So then I would think about it for a week, and then we get on the phone, and I'd say, here's what we should do. I give the next argument, and he'd shoot it down. Okay, let's talk about it in a week. So this would go on for a while.
Okay.
And then at some point, he would say, oh, you're right, and that's the end of the conversation. And sometimes I would say, oh, yeah, actually, you're right. But about a third of the time, we never agreed, and he just let me do it my way.
Okay.
So the discussion would end, and I'd do it what I would. And he never cared. All he cared was, what's your intention? What are you trying to do? And are you, being open and honest? That's what he wanted.
Oh, yeah.
So we're each different, but, we had different roles, but worked very well together.
Well, thank you to show us. There's many stories we don't know about Steve, but actually we all miss him.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we all miss him.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about technology. I believe technology is very important for Pixar. I still remember, the first time I saw the movie A Bug's Life. I still remember there's hundreds of bugs fighting with each other. Well, at that time, I believe no one can do that except Pixar. So is there any technology breaking through happen behind that?
Well, Bug's Life came out. It's a second movie, and it came out 3 years after Toy Story.
Toy Story.
So it took a while for us to build up to the point where we're making films at a regular rate. But we learned a lot from this, and so we were trying to change everything and make every aspect of it better. Because the first one, it's all flat floors, walls. The characters are made out of plastic.
Yeah.
The humans didn't look all that good. But people didn't care because all they cared about was the story.
Yeah.
But we were trying to improve the looks, trying to give better tools for the animators. So it was a continual improvement in the technology while our creative people are making the story. So they're going hand in hand, and they work very close together. So they'd ask for things. So there was an interchange between technology and the art. Because the artists would want things that the technology couldn't provide, so they would try to provide it. But once they'd make something, the artist would look at it and say, oh, I didn't know you could do that. That's cool. Let me use that, and it will change my story.
Oh, they changed the story, right?
Oh, yeah. Because they could do things they couldn't do before.
Okay.
Back and forth, back and forth.
So back and forth.
Still, today.
Till today.
Oh, yeah. Don't stop.
Well, I'm wondering, just like you said, if what people really cared is the story. So what is the role of technology for movie business?
Well, the way I think about it is that technology is integral to our culture. So they should be intertwined. that to separate them is actually an unnatural act. And people think it's unusual, like, well, they're, that's kind of cool, they could do that, but that's not normal. Like Pixar can do it. But it's not true. Think about it. Technology is integral in your life. You've all got a telephone in your purse or your wallet, and there's this incredible technology there, and then you're connected across the internet. What does it mean to separate them? And they shouldn't be separate. But if you accept it as part of it, it's not cold. It can be human because we're saying that we are the ones who are using it. There's that human creative part of us that are in this also, recognizing the cultural aspects of it, but also keeping our grounding with the past. Like, I love to go out in nature. I love the fact that there are these 20-year-old rusting out hulks that are being used. I think that's amazing. But that was the technology of the time.
Yeah.
Right? And now the technology has changed. Why shouldn't that be part of who we are?
So you not just use technology to get the advancement. You don't need to get advancement. You just get them together with art, right? So
yeah.
is technology? Can we say technology liberate something for movie industry?
Well, technology, like a lot of things, can be good and bad.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the last century was when they figured out how to make movies and film.
Yeah.
That was the technology of the time. It was advanced technology.
Yeah, motion picture is a technology.
That's right. Putting sound on was technology.
Yes.
Figuring out how to do color, how to separate out the images. It was all technology of the time.
Okay.
So people would make these wonderful films, and they made a whole bunch of crappy films. People trying to make money. They were, mind-filling fluff. Now, fast forward to today, technology has enabled new ways of telling stories. Some of these are amazing, and they get to the heart, and a lot of them are eye candy. They're boring, and they're stupid, and they're wasting time, and they're not paying attention to the story because they're trying to make it look good. So it may look good, but it's a terrible story.
It's
So-
like you enter a candy store
Yeah,
and you
so-
forget your meal.
That's right. So that's the thing about when I say technology is integrated is, like, it's there. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
Are we going to do something wonderful with it? Are we going to help the world? Are we going to help somebody? Are we just trying to make money? Or are we trying to get famous? And
Yeah.
everybody says they want to help. Everybody says they want to do the right things, and the priority is to make quality. But the way they act frequently doesn't show that.
Yeah.
What it's showing is they need to be in charge, they need to make more money, they need to be famous. That's the real action.
Yeah. Yes. That's part of that's human, right?
It's human.
It's human.
So
yeah.
we would say, well, a company has to make money, and it does.
Yeah.
And we'd say we want it to make a good product, which is number one. So most people say, well, if they make a good product, then the money follows. Okay, that's what they say.
Yeah.
But for most people, short-term thinking, making the profit is more important than making the product.
Yeah.
So, but they won't admit it. So it's what you do that makes the difference.
What you do makes the difference.
Yeah.
I think making to make a successful movie is not easy. It's very hard. But somehow Pixar keep producing successful movie, and it's go on and go on. And most fascinating thing is you have so many different themes and subjects. You have story go beyond the outer space. You have story under the water, under the sea. You even have story inside people's head. So how do you guys do that? Because it's quite different. It's easier to make something that you're familiar, but it seems like every time you will change the subject, change the theme, but you still get success. Is there any secret behind this Do you have some certain principle to make that happen?
Yes, there are. I mean, for me, there are three phases of a project. The first one is deciding what your risk is. You might do something like if it's a sequel, it's low risk. It's still hard to make a sequel. It's just as hard, but it's lower risk. But if you do a film about an old man that wants to float away or a rat that wants to cook, that's high risk. And then the second phase is you have to work out the consequences. You have to figure out what that story is. Or does the team work together? Does the technology work? And then the last phase is you want to lock and load. I got to make this. And you don't want to introduce new risk into it. I mean, things still bad will happen, but you're not, you're trying to just get it made. Now, you have to know which phase you're at. And at that beginning phase, which you can't skip, you have to do some things that are risky. So we will make some things like Incredibles 2, which is low risk.
Yeah.
But it's important to us to make some films, like Ratatouille is a good example, where that's just highly risky. And we have some films now when if you explain to somebody we're going to make this film, they would say, that can't possibly work. It's when you're doing the things that can't possibly work is when you actually create art or something new.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You're trying to do the things that most people would say is too risky. And it's not that everything is high risk, but if you do a certain number of things that are of high risk, it's a signal to everybody that's who we are.
Yeah. I think I learned a lot from that. Yeah. I also noticed there are many Pixar movies, they carried by young directors. They're not famous. Before the movie, they're not famous. We don't know them. But it's turned out every time Pixar can choose the right people and give them the opportunity, and they bring something new. So I'm wondering, how do those system works that made you guys can keep attract and you know who is the talent people, and you can help them to succeed?
Well, they may not be famous, but we know them.
You know them.
Because they're working with us. And because of the way we work, there are a lot of people at the outside who say, well, I want to work there. So we can watch them. And there are some people who've got remarkable abilities. And you take those and say, okay, I'd like to give you more opportunity. And with some, we will say, we'd like you to direct a film. Now, they don't all succeed. All right?
Yeah.
Because it is a risk. That's what a risk means, right? Sometimes it's too much for them. And it's difficult. But we then want them to come up with 3 ideas for a film.
3 ideas?
Yes. The reason is, if you say to somebody, come up with an idea for a movie, they'll get stuck. And so part of the process, and I think this is true with whatever we do, because any organization gets stuck. Say, why are they stuck? What do we do for this problem? Well, in this case, if you're coming at the movie, you get stuck because you keep thinking about solving this problem. Work on 3 ideas. So as soon as you get stuck, switch to the other idea or the other one. And then you come back to this one, now your head's in a different thing, and you can actually try something different on your first idea. So you go through that. Now, by the time they pitch their ideas, there is one that they love. They won't admit it. They'll say they like them all equally.
Yeah, of course.
But you can tell when they pitch.
How?
Well, I'll give an example from Coco. Okay, so we asked Lee, the director, to come up with 3 ideas. And coming up with the ideas is like you're thinking of the story, you draw what characters might look like, you come up with a lot of artwork.
Yeah.
You show on the walls, just try to get a feeling.
Yeah.
And all this material fits on the wall of one of our story art rooms. So these are like 15 by 20-foot rooms, something like that. So they're rectangulars. You have 2 longer walls. All the artwork's on one wall. So we pitch it and we talk about it. Then we're done after the discussion, turn to the other wall, he pitches the second idea. So there are only two long walls, so for the third idea, we have to go into the other room. So we get up, we walk into the other room, they open the door. Both walls, the table and the ceiling are filled with Mexican artwork.
Oh, that's what he loved, right?
So without hearing one single word, I said to myself, I know which movie we're making.
You really know people, right?
Because that's what you want, it's the passion.
Yeah.
And they're going to show. You can tell. We've always been able to tell. Even though they disguise it to say I love them all the same, that with the passion, you know.
Oh.
And when they're done, then they will say, I was hoping you'd pick that one.
Oh, really? Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, let's talk about you. Because, I just find out that you, at the very beginning of Pixar, you are CTO and you are president. And then CTO and president, and this CTO, you go back and forth several times.
Yeah, I was president of Pixar 3 times.
3 times.
Yes. Which meant that I was not president of Pixar twice.
Twice, yeah. That's more accurate. Yeah, so you have a technology background. And, from a CTO to the president, it means you will shift your role. And so is that difficult?
Well, when I was at Lucasfilm, I was over all of the research and development for the company. We had 4 groups: graphics, digital audio, video editing, and games. But I was like running a research lab. And then we spun out as a company, and then I was the president of a company, and I didn't know what I was doing. And so we went through this, and it was very hard. And then at one point, Steve said, you really don't know enough to be the president. And
He said that
yeah.
in your directory.
Yes.
Oh.
And but the thing was, I knew he was right.
Oh, you know him, right?
Yeah. I didn't know enough. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So at that point, I became the CTO, and we brought in somebody from the outside. And so that went for a couple of years. A really nice guy. I like him a lot. But he did try to manage Steve, like manage information. And the one thing I figured out is you never do that with Steve. He's too smart.
Yeah.
I never told him how to think, ever. I said, here's the problem. And then we could talk about it, but I never told him what to think. So now we're getting to the point where we're going to, he leaves and we're making commercials and we're going to start making Toy Story. And I made the president again. Now I know a lot more. So we go through, I'm the president while we're making the film, and we get close to the end, and we're getting ready to go public.
Yeah.
And Steve said, well, now we're going to be a public company, but you don't know enough to be the president of a public company.
Again.
Well, yeah, you're right. I don't know enough. So I stepped back, and I still did the same things there.
Yeah.
But we went public, and we had this weird thing called the Office of the President, which I was part of. And then later, after we were successful and I knew more, at one point, Steve announced to the company, he says, well, Ed's the president of Pixar. But I've been doing the same thing all along. I mean, I keep learning and knowing more. And when he announced it the 3rd time, most people scratched their heads and said, I thought he already was. But for me, it was just a path of growing and learning. And it was educational. But, both for me personally as well as for how we worked as an organization.
Yeah. I think there are many entrepreneurs who have technology background, and now they are the CEOs, they are the president, they are lead the company. Do you have any suggestion for them if they need to?
Yeah, I
take
mean, for
the
me, it
road
was one of the most important things, and I learned it fairly early on. And this is when I was first put in charge, and I went to Lucasfilm. Because in that world I was fairly well known, what I found was that that new people coming in began to treat me differently because of my position.
Okay. Yeah.
And what I found, finally we got to Pixar, was there were certain problems that I could no longer see because people would not behave poorly in front of me. So if there was a problem, I would never see it directly.
Yeah.
And because there are people I'd known for a long time, if there are problems, I would find out. But I realized that I can't see things directly. And I think that's true everywhere. In a company, you assume that everybody is there to help and to be good. And the people who are working down on the floor or doing it or programming or you're going out to the outside world, they see things that I can't see. At the same time, in my position, I can see things they can't see. But that doesn't mean that I'm right. It means a lot of times they're right because they have information that I don't have. Which means I have to start with the position of I'm always wrong on something at some time. Always. I just don't know what it is. So I have to search and figure out where it is that I'm wrong. I also have to always listen when somebody comes in to tell me something. There's a reason they're saying something, and they might be nervous in giving the information.
Yeah.
So if they come in and there's a problem, I might give them a perspective which helps them go out and say, okay, I see. But more often, they're telling me something that I didn't know that changes my perspective. And sometimes they're contradictory, like they may want one thing, or they think we should do something, and I think we should do something, and a different thing. And so I have to make a decision, so I'll make a decision to go this way.
Yeah.
But the important thing was that person felt like they were heard. And feeling like they're heard was the most important thing. If they had an opinion and they never felt comfortable in saying it,
They don't knock your door again.
yeah, they won't knock on the door.
Yeah.
Which means no matter what they say, I always have to pause and listen. And know that most of the time they're giving me something new that I should know.
Yeah. Sometimes the small things really have big impact, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just like your attitude. How do you handle
Yeah.
to listen to them?
And
Yeah.
you know, if somebody comes in with a problem and they're the only person that's got it, then I take it as a flag. Okay, I heard a flag. If it comes in 2 or 3 times, it's not a flag anymore. That's a problem.
That's a problem.
So you have to be open for the flags. But the other side, you also have to send out clues to people about openness and safety. Because if they don't feel comfortable, then you're not going to get the flags. So I want the flags, they want the comfort. And so there are other things we try to do. And one of them is that in any of our meetings or in any of our departments, is it safe for the least powerful person in the room to talk? Does the least powerful person feel like they can say something? Now, if they feel safe, then really what you've done is you've now said to the bulk of the professionals who have more experience, you have really said to them, it's safe for you to come up with ideas even if they don't work. And you give the signal of safety for the whole department by making sure the least powerful person can talk. Signals are important.
Signal is very important. Yeah. So make right signal.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. You know, after Disney, the merge with Disney Animation and Pixar, I think you're taking in charge the 2 studio, which is both top of the world. So it must be quite an experience.
Actually, one of the great joys of my life was to do that. The one thing that we tried, and I felt very strongly about this to begin with, is that we not merge them. Now, the natural thing with a lot of companies, if you get a group, you might say, why would I have 2 finance groups? Why would I have 2 research
Make it
groups?
to one.
Yeah, merge them together.
Yeah.
And I had just the opposite view. And we had a rule, like they could not do any production work for each other. They could share information. They could tell how they did things. But the decision about how they were going to work belonged in each studio separately. We wanted different personalities. We wanted them to work different ways. And it's like friendly competition. But because they didn't have to do anything a certain way, we made it safe for them to share. Like every year we have a conference between the two. They all share everything because they know they don't have to they're not told what to do.
Yeah.
And again, it's a signal of safety. But also by keeping them separate, we've got people who've got different opinions, able to try different things. We have twice the horsepower by keeping them separate. Yeah. And most companies don't do that. Let's buy this small company. Let's provide them services. Is that me making that noise? Or is it lightning?
Yeah.
We'll provide them the services, and what they do is they end up killing the company that they bought.
Yeah.
Happens over and over again.
Yeah.
And our view was, no, let's keep them healthy and separate, which is usually smaller, and celebrate the differences. It's the differences that are going to make us stronger.
Celebrate their differences.
Yes.
Yeah.
Likewise, when it comes to, I can never be another gender. I can never experience what a woman experiences. I can never be of another race.
Yeah.
I can never be from another culture. So I don't know what those experiences are. All I can do is believe that thing that I don't know is of value. It's a leap of faith. That somebody coming in from a different culture, if they're a different race, if it's a woman that comes, they have something to add, and I can't make assumptions. I just believe that there's something good that's going to come out of that. And by making it safe and open, you become richer, and you provide something greater for the world.
And these two studios can be each other's inspiration.
And they are.
They are, right?
Yes, they love each other.
Oh, that's good. And, let's come back to talk about technology. I think Pixar, the successful company, really, reshaped the animation industry or even the film industry. But right now, there are some people said we have too much CG. Because, like you said, it's like we go in a candy shop and it's too shiny, too playful, and then we forget the meal. So, from your perspective, is that technology have its limits? And also, what is the essence of storytelling? So how we mix this together?
Well, people confuse the technology with the human element. So as I said, we're in a technological world, and the technology is around us, and it's lighting us, and it's putting up the monitors all over the place. And, I've got a supercomputer in my pocket. All right. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
But what's the human element? I'm not trying to say that we've become dehumanized by it. It's to say they're all together. So when I see a film and they're putting a lot of special effects up, and I don't care about the story, then I don't care what it looks like. I think it's a waste of people's time. It turns out it's just as hard to make a bad movie as it is to make a good movie. I mean, think about the people who are building these models, or they're doing their acting, or their voices, and so forth.
But it's a bad movie, right?
Yeah, it's just as hard. So which means that it's only 2 or 3 people that, for ego reasons or whatever, aren't spending the time on the story because they're focusing on what it looks like. So it's like all technology. You can abuse it, and we know this, right? Technology absolutely can be abused. And we look forward in the future. We've got some exciting things coming, and there's going to be some meatheads who abuse it. It's going to happen. So if you think about storytelling, stories are a way of communicating with each other.
Yeah.
So we, reality is too complex. We simplify, so we make stories. So if we want to communicate with a child, say, oh, here, take a tablet and, fall in love with it. No. Hold the child on your lap and read a book. That's the right way to tell a story. So, there'll be times when they watch television and play with the iPads. There are times that's good, but it can be overdone. You can fill your life with entertainment and you've done nothing. So what's our balance? How do we think about our balance? We have to think about it. Because if we don't, somebody else will think about it for us. Well, we don't want that.
Okay.
I don't want somebody else to tell me how to balance my life. That's my job.
Well, we talk about the limits of technology. I think it's quite interesting because in Japan, there's a very famous artist that I think you know him.
Miyazaki.
Oh yeah, you said the name. Yeah, because it's like he never used computer technology. They just still use a pen.
Oh, and I hope he never does.
Uh-huh.
No, at one time he was thinking of doing a little 9-minute short.
Really?
Yeah, and I haven't talked with him since then, so he finally came to his
So
senses.
you communicate with each other. So how do you two see each other?
Well, what he does is phenomenal. All right, and it's hand-drawn, right? It's art. But there are also people who do stop-frame animation, and some of it's wonderful. And I look at the Disney films, which is what made me want to be an artist in the first place. And I know some of the people, even some of the older people that were there. In fact, at Disney they had what were called the 9 Old Men, these amazing animators. And so at one point, 2 of them, and they're in the mid-70s at the time, and they had written the best book on animation that's ever been written. And they came up to Lucasfilm at the time to see what was happening, because we were starting the first things to make the images look good enough for movies. And what they said was, and he autographed my book, and he said, "We need you." That's what he said to me. So he's this old man to this young guy saying, "We love what you're doing. We wish we were young because we would want to do this."
Oh.
And I thought, this is great. These people have so much energy that they want something that's new, and they're in their 70s. That's who they are, and they're artists. So you look at these different areas and say, well, there are all kinds of art.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's one kind, like, okay, I'm in computer animation. I only like computer animation? No. That's like saying the only kind of music you like is classical. Well, actually, I like classical, I like rock music, rap, but, it's like all kinds. And it's true with all arts.
Yeah.
And so he's one of the most inspirational artists ever.
Yeah. Yeah. The beauty of the world is the variety itself. Right?
Yes,
yeah.
that's right.
I think I totally agree with you. So, Ed, I believe you already announced this year going to be the last year you work for Pixar and Disney. So, how do you plan your work this year? Do you want to finish another successful movie
Well,
or something else?
No, what it is, 5 years ago, I started the succession plan. I picked my successor, and then a year later, at each studio, a year later, I made them the president. So this is 4 years ago. The two men reporting were the president of the studios. And we picked the creative people who would then become the successors. And at Pixar, it's Pete Docter, and at Disney, it's Jen Lee, who's one of the 2 directors on Frozen.
Yeah.
And having picked the right people and knowing that, because these are people I've worked with for my entire career. So I started on this path 48 years ago, and I've always tried to think, where do we go? What's next? And then reach the point where, to pick my successors, But if you pick successors, you have to actually let them succeed. You have to let them do the thing, or otherwise they would become dispirited.
Yeah.
So it was time to turn the reins over. And I actually thought what would happen is like it would emotionally hit me, like, oh, this is lost. But it didn't happen that way. It was like, oh, this is the completion of an arc. And I feel good about it because the people I love who feel so strongly about Pixar are now the ones who are running it. And Bob Iger said, okay, take the next 6 months and revise your book.
Oh, you're going to rewrite your book.
I'm going to revise it, and I'm going to add a couple chapters.
Okay.
I learned a lot, more than I intended.
So I think it's going to be a legacy for Pixar. Do you think so? Do you think it sees that way?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing was, for the most part in the film industry, they don't actually work the way we work. So we never keep secrets. I don't care about secrets. It's about the way people work. I hope my bigger impact is in other places. And so people will read it because the movie making is kind of exciting to talk about. But I believe these principles are universal. And so for me, the legacy I want to have beyond Pixar and Disney is, can I say something that helps other people? And I don't know, but I'd like to try.
Well, I think it's beyond Pixar. Thank you. Thank you. Although I don't want it, but it seems our interview is coming to an end. But I want to take some time, to express my appreciation for you. Over 33 years, if I remember right. Brilliant job, brilliant work to give us Pixar. And, I think many of our audience will share my feeling. Pixar is not just a successful company. It's something beyond that. I think it's inspiration. And inspiration is a great treasure for all people around the world. And I think we do thank you for that. So thank you, Ed. Thank you for
so much.
Join us. And I wish, and we can learn more from you. So finish the book.
Well, I have completely enjoyed your hospitality and the graciousness of everybody here. It's an honor to be here. And I just hope that not just me, but the people around and succeed will continue to do something that makes a difference.
Make difference.
Yes.
好，我们大家热烈的掌声再给 Ed， 感谢他给我们今天的分享，谢谢 ，Thank you Ed，
谢谢
，Thank you very much。Let me walk through here.
Okay. To me. All right.
Okay.